When people start falling one by one, run. We need to leave the city for good if we want to survive.
Lisa, sweetie, look at me.
Hi, Grandma.
No matter what happens, no matter how tempted you are, do not look back, or we'll die. Hey, watch where you're going, the guy shouted, shaking his fist. Sorry, buddy, John replied calmly. Every day, on his way back from work, John thought about the same thing. A city that was once a hub of progress and prosperity had now become a place of chaos, ignorance, and indifference. People had forgotten what compassion and care for one another meant. He wondered what would happen to them if Judgment Day came. That day, as John walked past the homeless man he saw every day on his way home, a strange feeling made him stop. Looking at the poor man in torn clothes with a dirty face and a disheveled beard, he pulled a sandwich out of his bag and handed it to him. The man looked up, his eyes tired but full of gratitude.
Thank you,
he said, taking the food with a trembling hand. John nodded and turned to leave, but the man's voice stopped him.
Wait,
the homeless man said, his voice suddenly firm and confident. John turned around. The man's eyes were now focused and filled with energy. His voice was soft, yet calming.
When the time comes and people start falling one by one, you and your family will have a chance to survive. But to do so, you must follow one condition. Within an hour, you must leave the city for good. On the way, once you're on the bridge, no matter what, don't look back. No matter how strong the temptation, do not look back. If you do, consider your chance lost.
The old man's words left John frozen in place. He felt a chill run through his body. "What are you talking about?" he asked, barely getting the words out. At that moment, the man's face turned indifferent again. He shuffled back to his spot and collapsed, exhausted. John stared at the man, unable to make sense of it. Was this real, or had the conversation even happened at all? The next day, John and his family decided to spend the day at a local park. After walking around for a bit, they stopped at a small cafe conveniently located in the shade. It was quiet and peaceful around them. At a nearby table, a young couple was calmly discussing something. The waitress was busily serving drinks and food. There was no sign of trouble. Lisa, John's wife, was talking about the furniture she had bought on Amazon and how cozy their home was going to be. John sipped his coffee, listening to her attentively, but his mind was still in that alley with the homeless man. Since that meeting, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. A sense of unease deep inside him left no room for anything else.
John, are you even listening to me?
Lisa asked, noticing her husband's distracted expression. "Dad, just relax already. Forget about work for a second," said Emily, not looking up from texting her friends on her phone. Yeah, I'm listening," John said, trying to shake the intrusive thoughts from his mind. Suddenly, a young, energetic man walking by collapsed to the ground as if his life force had been drained from him in an instant. His body lay motionless like a stone. A second later, fire erupted from his chest, engulfing him in flames and reducing him to ashes in mere seconds. John and Lisa stared in disbelief.
Oh my goodness.
Gasped Lisa, her voice filled with shock.
John, did you see that?
Before John could respond, the waitress carrying drinks let out a sharp scream and suddenly froze in place, standing in an odd, slightly unnatural pose, as if some unknown force was holding her. The tray slipped from her hands and crashed to the ground, the sound of breaking glass echoing around them. John whipped around at the sound. His gut told him something was seriously wrong. The waitress swayed and then collapsed lifelessly to the ground. Flames quickly consumed her body, leaving nothing behind.
When people start falling one by one, run,
echoed the thought in John's mind. John shot a panicked look at Lisa and said, "It's started. We need to leave the city for good if we want to survive," John said quickly, his voice tight with fear.
Are you serious?
Lisa blurted out.
I'm expecting a delivery today.
John grabbed Lisa and Emily by the hands and pulled them with him. They ran toward their car, parked not far from the park.
What's happening?
Emily asked, her voice trembling and breathless. "This is the end, Lisa. I always knew this city was doomed. We're leaving for good." John frantically tried to think of a way to get them out faster. Finally, they reached the car. John, in his panic, couldn't find the keys. Lisa and Emily stared at him with confused looks. "We only have an hour," John said hurriedly as he jumped into the car. Or we'll end up like that poor soul, he added, pointing to the burning woman just outside their car. Listen to me carefully, John said, starting the engine with shaky hands. We need to leave the city immediately. Forever. Or we'll die, he said, his voice firm but urgent.
I'm not going anywhere. This is our home. Our friends are here.
Lisa and Emily protested in unison. One important thing, no one looks back when we get on the bridge. No matter what happens, no matter how tempted you are, do not look back, John insisted. Lisa and Emily nodded hesitantly, their faces a mix of fear and uncertainty. They didn't understand what was happening, but they sensed it was serious. John pulled out of the parking lot, speeding down the park's winding roads as fast as he could, driving further away from the city. The streets, usually bustling even on weekends, were eerily quiet. In the distance, through the burning buildings and smoke, they could see burning bodies. Moans and screams echoed from all sides. John didn't dare stop or even slow down, focused on getting out of the city as fast as possible. Finally, they reached the bridge that marked the city's boundary, the very one the homeless man had mentioned. A large sign loomed overhead. City limits. This was the threshold, the point beyond which they must not look back if they wanted to survive. As soon as they drove onto the bridge, strange voices began to whisper around them.
Do you hear that?
Lisa asked tensely. Yeah, I hear them. Our test has begun. Just don't look back, Lisa, John said softly but firmly.
I know that voice.
Lisa whispered fearfully.
Hi, Grandma.
Lisa? Lisa, are you here? John said cautiously, keeping his eyes on the road.
I miss you so much.
Lisa said gently.
John, she's here. Her voice is right behind me. I want to see her so badly.
Lisa, no. Hold on. We just have to cross this bridge, John said firmly, gripping the wheel tighter. Without taking his eyes off the road, he pressed harder on the gas pedal.
Lisa, sweetie, look at me.
The soothing voice of her grandmother echoed in Lisa's mind. Lisa could no longer resist the temptation to see her grandmother, with whom she had never gotten the chance to say goodbye. This was her chance to see her again and say everything she hadn't been able to back then. The desire overwhelmed her. Slowly, she began to turn her head. Lisa! No! John shouted, but it was too late. Lisa's gaze was locked on something invisible and incomprehensible. She stared at one spot, her expression gradually filling with horror. Whatever she saw, whether it was the city's manifested darkness or something else, was too much for her to bear. In that moment, the darkness entered her, changing her inner world forever. Her body trembled violently. Her eyes became glassy and vacant. John looked on in horror as Lisa's body twisted and contorted. The smell of burning flesh began to fill the car. Small flames started to appear beneath Lisa's skin. Emily, smelling the burning flesh, screamed. She closed her eyes, unable to watch what was happening to her mother. John kept driving, his heart breaking with every mile. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He knew there was nothing he could do. The city had claimed her, as it had so many others. All he could do now was keep driving, never looking back, no matter how much it hurt. For his daughter's sake and his own, he had to keep going. They say the city burned to the ground. It burned for a month, and people from nearby towns heard strange sounds coming from there. Sounds of anger, decay, and filth.